What's up, my beautiful marketing people? Welcome to another episode of Mind Your Marketing. Today, joining us is Ross Simmonds. He is the founder of The Foundation, a B2B content marketing agency. He has a book coming out, which I'm excited to talk with him about. And he also has a podcast, Create Like the Greats, which is a great listen for anybody who's looking to get a little inspiration. Ross, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. And I'm really looking forward to diving in and chatting about marketing today. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, totally. So we kind of have same but different journeys with regards to
Yeah.
agency owners, different spaces, creating content. I'm really curious though about your kind of aha moment or the thing that brought you to say, "Hey, I'm going to start an agency." And then walk me through those initial days of you're in Nova Scotia. It's not, I'm sure you've heard it a lot when people are like, what you should move to San Francisco
Yeah.
or Toronto or
Right.
whatever. So take me back, man, and walk me through, yeah, those initial days and thinking like, hey, I
Yeah.
can make money doing this.
Yeah. 100%. So, as you mentioned, from Nova Scotia, a lot of people are probably listening to this and being like, where in the world is that? They're going to Google, they're trying to figure it out. It's on the far east coast of Canada, Nova Scotia. And I just said, figure it out. My oats flared up a little bit, so the Canadian is fully on display. When I was young, I always loved business. I always loved entrepreneurship. I sold do-rags out of my locker when I was a kid. When I was even younger than that, I had a board game that I created in elementary that I was selling. My grandfather sold Christmas wreaths around the neighborhood and I was his best employee. Like, I always loved entrepreneurship and business. And when I graduated from university, I fell in love with the internet because I had a fantasy football blog that I was writing to essentially pay for my tuition. And after being able to generate revenue, after getting featured in some of the top sports publications under my alias, I was like, this internet thing is going to take off and I really need to double down on it. So I continued to go hard at my fantasy football blog. And as the traffic went up, my marks went down. And I was going to be the first guy to ever graduate from my mom's family to get a university degree. And she was like, son, you're not failing. You have to improve your marks and graduate. So she made me change my blog from writing about fantasy sports to writing about my degree, which was in marketing. And it was kind of accidental. I only went into marketing because there was two key reasons. One, it improved my GPA, and two, I was obsessed with Mad Men and Boomerang and these movies that showed advertising as a pretty glamorous industry. So I went all in and I started to write about marketing. And when I started to create content about marketing, weird things started to happen. I had companies start to reach out to me and fly me from little Nova Scotia down to Miami to go into a boardroom with CMOs and C-suite executives to talk about marketing to millennials. Because at the time when I was in university, millennials weren't like we are now, where we have bad knees and hip replacements. Like, back then we were young and hip and cool, and everybody wanted to target us, and they were looking for me for inspiration around how do you market to these folks. So one blog post allowed me to get flown out to Miami from a rural place like Nova Scotia, and that's when all of the light bulbs opened up. I have an opportunity to create content online and then sell my ideas and my thoughts and perspectives on things like social media to brands. That was when everything changed. So I doubled down on creating content, continued to push stories live, wanted to break into advertising world, got a job at an ad agency, studied their game, studied the way that they were doing business, worked there for about a year and a half, quit, put in my notice, and launched up my own agency, which at the time was called Altigo, which is like an alter ego. It didn't work because nobody could pronounce the name. And then I essentially said, I'm just going to do this as myself, rosssimmons.com. Started to be a consultant. Fast forward about 5 years into that, was like going well, but the nights were catching up to me and a baby was on the way. And I was like, I need to start hiring people, started to hire a team. And you fast forward a few years later, and now we have Foundation, and we're a team that works with a handful of some of the top B2B SaaS companies in the world. And we're all fully remote, and we've been remote from the beginning, but 50% of the team is probably based out of Nova Scotia, another 25% throughout Canada, and then the rest is kind of global.
No, that's awesome. Now, what year about was this? Were you in university? Just for like, so
Yeah.
people can kind of be like, all right, that was going on in the internet at that time.
Yeah. So this would have been right when Facebook had launched Jetman. So that would have been probably 2008, would be
Okay.
my guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
2008. Yeah.
the glory days of social media when
Exactly.
we all just share anything
Yeah, pretty
on the
much, pretty much.
on the
Well, I
internet.
remember in my first year of university, Facebook was rolled out. Like, they actually launched in my first year, so I don't know when that was, but essentially you weren't allowed to use Facebook unless you had a certain university email account. Like, I can remember being on Facebook because I had a university email account and some of my friends couldn't get on because they didn't go to university, and I was like, Facebook is amazing. Like, y'all need to get on this thing. Like, it's cool. You can connect with people all over the world. And then the year that they rolled it out to everyone, I was like, oh no, now my friends are gonna get on this thing too, and it was game over from
It
there.
was an
But
interesting time. Yeah,
it
no, I'm
was,
with you. I think at my freshman year, it was like it came out. Yeah,
yeah,
it was like, and I was like, "What the heck?"
yeah,
And people are sharing it, same thing. Now, I love that you went in, got in with an agency for a bit, kind of like, okay, I can kind of like understand what a SOP is and things
right,
like that,
right,
right?
right.
And then you get into the consultant world, and I think a lot of us do this. I've done it. Get in, start getting work, and like you said, the night starts to catch up. You
Yeah,
start taking everything in and you're thinking, hey, they paid for me. My hands have to be on keys. I have to be the one doing this. And this is a lot of times where I believe that we've just created a job that masquerades as a business
right,
when we're in
right.
a consultant
Mm.
role
Yep,
and we're just grinding a lot of times for worse pay, worse
yep,
benefit, no benefits. And then that aha moment goes off,
yep,
where you're like, I need to hire, I need to start letting go of control. But what I want to
yep.
know is, did you battle with that at all? Like the letting go of control and putting like, your baby
Oh
into
yeah,
somebody else's hands, like
yeah.
not your physical baby, the kind of
No, no, for
the
sure.
business baby, into somebody else's hands to work with. Yeah. Like what was your experience like going through that?
It would have been 2016. I would have been 28, 27 years old, and I cracked the quarter million mark, 270K, solopreneur, freelancer, and it felt good. Like, it felt really good. And I knew that I needed to kind of be more scalable because at that point, as you mentioned, it was a grind. Like, I was probably producing anywhere from 10 to 15 pieces of content for clients on a monthly basis. This was pre Jasper, pre AI. So this is just good old sweat ideas coming to your brain. And I was just cranking these pieces out, sometimes developing like 4,000 word pieces, sometimes 10,000 if somebody wanted a white paper. Like, I was consultant, but also doer. And it was a grind. Like, it was a real grind. When I started to make the decision to hire, I wanted to do it right. And I intentionally blocked time in my calendar where I went to a local library, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I plugged in my headphones and I started to record looms, where I just, like, loom wasn't around back then. It was this thing called Soapbox that I was using. So no, I don't think it's existing anymore, but I was essentially recording videos of myself talking about the processes for how I write a blog post, how I do a framework, how I manage social media for clients, how I put together a great tweet, a great Facebook post. I did all of that up front. And then I made one hire that was fresh out of university. And I was like, okay, great. I did 270 last year. If I hire someone, they're going to cost me maybe 50K. Okay, that's great. That means I'm going to make 220. I grew up with not a lot of money. So if I fail, it just means I have to eat Mr. Noodles again. So I wasn't too stressed out over that. It means I have to call mom and dad and say, look, I might have to live in your basement. I wasn't stressed over that. So I did that math and I was like, all right, if I'm doing this much money, can I survive with the rest? Of course I can. Let's make that higher. What happened as soon as I made that higher is more unlocks started to happen, where I realized now I can spend more time on selling. Now I can spend all of the time that I would have been creating content for clients on creating content for me. And if I do that, it gives me the ability to reach more higher value clients and ultimately just continue to put more people in the seats within my company to do the execution work. So then from there, I just continue to put in more and more people. And there's no question that in those early days, I was able to learn a ton around what's the right fit, what skill sets make sense, what are the traits that you need to look for, especially in a remote environment where we were fully remote from the beginning. It's a different ball game. So I had to bring in the right people. I brought in those individuals, helped them win by essentially making sure documentation was there. And then from there, the growth has kind of continued. But I would say the second most valuable thing that I did was probably about 3 years in. I brought in someone who I had worked with at that past agency. And I was like, you are the kind of opposite of me, where you're really good at finances, at operations, you're good at linear thinking, you're not scatterbrained. I need you to come and work with me. And then when she joined, it allowed us to just scale up even further and go to the next level. And I think that is my advice to anyone who's trying to get into the agency world, is like, figure out exactly what you need to do upfront to ensure that you have something that can be scalable and sellable to different clients. You need to have that fit. Once you can bring in some people that you can confidently say you can train in your processes, the next step is, unless you are superhuman, to find someone who can be that balance to you and give you essentially that ability to just scale yourself even further.
I love that. And a couple things from that, right? One, the giving you the ability to go to create content to get more clients, and this great equalizer, which is, LinkedIn, the internet,
Right.
blog, etc., where you can
Yeah.
put this content out. And now you're, like you said, you're able to work with companies all over,
Yeah.
North America and the world, and they come through, and you don't get, I don't want to call it stuck, but going through the motions of like sourcing local
Right.
business and working with the local car dealership, which is a great business. And I love them,
Yeah.
but their purchasing power is just not at the
Right.
same scale,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As a SaaS company that's raised money or enterprise has been established, et cetera,
Exactly.
that can fund your operation. So one, I love that. Two, I also love this idea of finding somebody to handle, the things that maybe, yeah, sure, things you were bad at, but also maybe the things you were like just medium at.
Right.
Like
Right.
I called it value neutral tasks,
True.
like
Yeah.
probably a lot of value neutral things,
Right.
because I believe getting into owning a business doesn't mean we should never get a day off. Like there
Yeah.
was very much like the grind set stuff that promoted that, but it's like no, you're saying you have kids, so you have to
Yeah.
balance that. And that's kind
Exactly.
of my next question is, did more of these unlocks, did you get to the point where you're like, okay, the hyper growth mentality is like kind of not whatever 26 anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna I'm not gonna work 12 hours a day I'd like to
Right.
like have dinner with my kids,
Yeah.
you know?
That played a major role in it for sure. Like it definitely did. It was like, I always said, and I still believe this to this day, even having kids, that not having kids was my like competitive advantage early on, because at that time I could work ridiculously late hours. I could put in the grind and I didn't really care too much. Like I was able to do that without fear of repercussions. Like I was able to consistently do that. Now you fast forward and it's like, I can't do that. Like I need to make time for the tea parties with my littles. I need to make time to take my littles to the playground. Like I need to be there and present, and I don't want to be on my phone looking at emails when they're asking me to watch them do a somersault or something like that. It's just not going to work. So there's definitely additional pressure around, okay, this is my new life circumstance. How do I create a company that aligns with the lifestyle that I want to live? And in doing that, you have to start being very intentional about recognizing the things that you are really, really, really good at that add a ton of value. And what are the things that you are okay at that you don't really need to continue to do and that someone else can tackle? Or things that you might be really, really, really good at, but you can have someone else do at 80%, and that 80% be enough for the market to say is really, really good. Those are things you also have to be comfortable with if you want to scale your company and scale your business to really serve you.
Do you think that, and I've heard this from a couple of people, so I'm interested to hear, do you think that, having kids has actually probably made you better now at business because you have to truncate your thinking so much now to be like, I'm going to do the highest leverage task that I can?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I would say it was the biggest game changer. Like I sent a text to a few of my friends after the first one arrived and I was like, I just have superpowers, but the superpower was pretty basic that anybody can actually apply. And that superpower is the increased necessity of saying no. You have to say no to things that don't actually serve you. And you have to be more intentional with that no when you have kids. Or at least I find that you do or you should. So for me, again, not everyone is the same. Not everyone is going to have the same values and perspective here. But like for me, I believe that I need to do two things. I need to be a great dad, great partner, and a great business person. If I can accomplish those two things, then I'm going to die happy someday. So like for me, when it comes to saying no, it's like, all right, I'm sorry. I can't just meet for coffee, but you can send me a loom. I'll watch it and I'll get back to you when I get a chance. You have to start taking control of your calendar. Wu Tang always used to say, cash rules everything around me. I believe in the acronym that calendars rule everything around me. I live and die by my calendar. My calendar, from the time I wake up until the time I go to sleep, has identified times in which I am playing literally with my kids, when I am writing, when I am creating, when I'm working out, when I'm going for a run, when I have a date night, when I am fixing something in my car, whatever it might be. All of these things are in my calendar, and I live and die by it. And I think it's the most powerful app on every single person's phone. But for some reason, a lot of us underestimate it, and we're always downloading these new productivity apps instead of just recognizing the only thing you can spend is time. So that just watch your time very closely, and you're able to optimize your life.
One that's so spot on, and like I'm with you on the philosophy. It's just so funny the productivity app thing because I believe like I always say you can read as many books and as many
Right.
apps about working out, as possible,
Yeah.
but eventually you got to do a push up, right?
That's it.
And like,
That's it.
and I think that that's a lot with work too. Like
Yeah.
you can read all these books and everything, but eventually you got to block out that time. And like what you're saying, I think some people hear, "Oh, my calendar is all blocked out," and they think that means busy.
Right.
No, like I have Thursday, for instance, mine
Yeah.
9 to 5 is called no meetings, thinking and
Right.
creating.
Love it.
That's it.
Love
And
it.
I just think and I create for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, of course I'm going to get a turkey sandwich or whatever in the between
Right.
that. I mean,
Exactly.
like,
100%.
so
Yeah.
it, finding the way to do that. Now, I love that structure. Now I want to talk and shift gears a little bit into the content you're creating, right? So you
Yeah.
have a podcast out. Talk
Yep.
to me about what I guess the premise of the podcast and then
Right.
what inspired it, and then also what kind of time commitment that takes because people
Yeah.
listening to this too are probably thinking, "Hey, I should start a podcast. I want to do that."
Right.
And then we can get into kind of like, growing a podcast. But I want
For
to
sure. Yeah,
go
no.
back to the
Happy to
beginning.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the podcast is called Create Like the Greats. And the idea behind Create Like the Greats is I believe that one of the key things that people don't always have, and for myself, when I was just getting started in business, that I wish I had, was the ability to understand and dive deep into the ways, the structures, the playbooks, the methodologies that other creators were using to be great and create something great. But what I also love to do is reverse engineer success to create something great. So over the years, a lot of people have read Foundation's content, my content, where we take some of the best content marketing engines in the world, companies like Canva, Masterclass, Toast, etc., and we break down what those teams did to create content excellence within those companies. What Create Like the Greats is doing is a very similar methodology, but not just doing it for companies, but also breaking down what went into the creation of a great conductor's career, what went into the great work that Prince has done in their career over the years. And we're talking to the people that would have worked closely with them. We're diving deep into the history of how some of the greatest creators of all time, whether it's media, it's blog posts, it's writing, it's music, it's art, whatever it may be, we're taking and understanding and articulating what it took for them to get on the journey. Now, what's also interesting is along this path, while we're creating content, is I'm also trying to create something great through Foundation and all of these other things. So I give people a glimpse behind the scenes into my day-to-day life, whether it's angel investments that I'm making and the decisions that go into those, whether I'm flying across the globe to speak at a conference, I'm sharing why and how and the thinking behind it. I'm giving a transparent look behind the scenes of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and a creator. So that's the gist of the episode, or the various podcast episodes that we've been producing up until this point. And the goal is simple. We want more people to feel like they can create something great and get the insights that they need to actually get there and do that.
I love that you talk about, sharing your process and what you're building alongside that because it's easy when we see finished product, right? And we go,
Right,
"Oh, look at FreshBooks. They've got
right,
whatever,
right.
and they did this crazy stuff and blah blah blah." And it's like, let's rewind it. Let's go
Yeah,
back to day one. I always tell people, regardless of if you're a fan or not, go watch Joe Rogan's first podcast
right, right,
and see it is a train wreck.
right.
But he right? But he made 2,000 of them or whatever. So
Yeah.
now you look at that, it's like, oh, taking that iterative approach, but then
Mhm.
giving people that behind the scenes in your own business to go, I'm trying this thing out
Right.
and it
That's
might
it.
work. might
Might
not.
work, might not.
Um,
Exactly. And I
you know,
think that's the key. It's like being transparent to give people a glimpse into like how is Ross approaching this thing. Like at the beginning of this year, I've recorded an episode around like my resolutions and the things that I wanted to accomplish. And it's been fascinating because the listeners are keeping me accountable to saying, Ross, can you run a 5K in under a certain amount of time yet? And I'm like, you're right. I should go for a run today and continue to practice and train. So it's like giving folks into a glimpse of not just the professional side, but also the human side and the challenges and struggles that we face as creators, entrepreneurs, and leaders. That's the goal. It's the goal to kind of just like pull back the curtain of all of the mythology and stuff like that around what we do. Everyone's just a human. And like, even though it's like, oh, Ross, you've got thousands of followers on this channel, this channel, this channel. I'm still just a human, I'm just a guy. And I want people to be able to realize that and see that through the content that we're doing through Create Like the Greats.
I love that. That's it's a great thing, and I think Sean from My First Million says it's like the goal is not to be well known, but known well. And
Right.
that
Right.
I really like that, and how you can like if you can take that thinking to be like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna let y'all in on my day to day and what this is,
Right.
and really connect with people. So everybody go check that out. Create Like the Greats. Now
Appreciate
you
it.
have a book coming out,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'll let you tee up the book and what it's
Yeah.
about, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, so definitely keep your eyes peeled. The book is going to be called Create Once, Distribute Forever. And the philosophy is simple. I think that some of the greatest minds of this generation, I think some of the greatest minds that have ever literally probably even existed, have created some amazing things. They've created great discoveries, journals, blog posts, essays, YouTube videos, songs, etc. And that content just collects dust. It collects dust because they didn't understand the power of distribution. And in Create Once, Distribute Forever, the goal is to showcase and show people how to distribute their stories, how to distribute their content successfully, how to distribute their creation successfully so they can reach more people. Distribution is one of the most underrated elements of success, but it's one of the most important. And I realized it early on because I was creating, in my opinion, great content ever since I first got started with content marketing and creating stuff online. But as my reach got bigger, those pieces started to get more reach, more shares, more follows. I can take a piece of content that I wrote back in 2018 and share it today, and it will get more traction simply because now I have better distribution channels. And I think there's a ton of people who have had podcasts for years, but that have never cracked distribution. They've never understood the importance of sending emails to their email list. They've never understood how to build an audience or how to go and seed content into a subreddit, into a community that aligns with the topic of interest. And that's what this book does. It showcases and is meant to be essentially the distribution Bible and playbook that everyone can use to understand how to distribute their stories and the assets that they're creating so they can truly unlock the power of distribution.
Yeah, and I can't wait. I'm going to check that out because you're spot on, right? I always, when I talk with clients, I'm like, look, you're going to get tired of your marketing long before the consumer does. You're
Right.
allowed to repost it, reshare
Yeah.
it, take that content. And like, I see this mistake happen all the time, which is a misalignment really of resourcing where, oh, we're going to pay a bunch for the
Right.
content to be made.
Right.
We're gonna get this great video. We're going to do this thing. And then you go ask for like a boost budget and they're like,
Yeah.
no, we don't have
No,
anything. And I'm like,
there's
well,
none.
why'd we spend why'd we pay a writer $800 and then a graphic like this piece all in was probably 2K to make,
Right. Right.
and we're not gonna we got $10 to
Yeah.
for distribution. Like
So
maybe,
broken.
yeah, it's
It's
so
so
broken.
broken.
So
Yeah.
I love that, and I think that especially for anybody listening who's on a a smaller marketing team, looking
Mm.
at being able to take one idea and really like milk it
Yeah.
and milk it on all the different platforms. Take that video and turn it into tweets and turn it
Yeah.
into a blog post. And then can
Yeah.
it be a podcast? And
Yeah.
you know,
I think that's the key, right? Like a lot of folks don't realize it, but when you create something that is valuable, it can be repurposed, remixed, and distributed literally forever. Like one podcast episode can become a series of tweets. Those series of tweets can be brought together and turned into a blog post. You can take that same podcast, turn it into a video that you upload to YouTube. You can stitch it all up, share it as a reel on Instagram, a reel on TikTok, a reel on Facebook. You can spread that across all of those channels and then reshare it to your stories. You can upload upload the same thing over to LinkedIn. That blog post that you wrote, you can copy and paste it, upload it as an article on LinkedIn. Then you can share that article in like 3 different groups that are also on LinkedIn. Take that same article, find a subreddit that was published a few years ago that was relevant to your audience, share it in that community, then add it to your signature. Like, there are so many different things that you can do with one single piece of content that the ratio is so broken. It should never be 90% of our efforts go into creation and 10% goes into distribution. It should be the complete flip. 10% should go into the actual creation of an asset, and then 90% should be in distribution, because the 90% happens over the rest of your life if the content is good. You can literally share it every single year, every single month for eternity. So the distribution should literally be forever, as long as the piece of content is good. If you're creating mediocre content, bad content that shouldn't get traction, shouldn't be spread, you got to start from the fundamentals anyway and just be like, all right, what am I doing? I'm creating bad content. But if the content is good, distribute it, promote it. The people that follow you today aren't the same people that followed you 6 months ago. It would be brand new content to them. But for some reason, we all get in our feelings and are like, no, I can't share it. I don't want to be that guy. Be that
So
person.
weird, right? Like,
Share
it's
it.
so
Share
weird.
it. It's
It's
so
so weird
weird.
with like this, like the block we get on, like, oh, I already shared that. Like,
Right.
no, go here are some tips I think for people. One,
Yeah.
when you're scheduling content, you're using a content scheduler, schedule it 5 times.
Yeah.
Go right
Yeah.
away when you're doing it once, schedule it 5 times, write your little different captions.
Yeah.
Boom. Now you've got, and once today, once 2 months from now, once a year from now, whatever, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Um, the other thing I'd say is, like, I think people think about content wrong sometimes. If they could build a
Mm,
tree and to
right.
go, what's that pillar content that's going to last forever? YouTube video, blog post, podcast, whatever, and then build an Instagram post off of that. Don't
Right.
lead with the IG post that's
Right.
fleeting and gets no
Right.
reach 2 weeks from now. And now
That's
you're
it.
trying to like up channel to build a YouTube video after. Maybe if you want to test an idea, whatever. But
Right.
I'm always like, to get the most juice for the squeeze, what's your core
Yeah.
theme? How can you
That's
split
it.
that thing 50 different ways and on 50 different channels, right?
Exactly. And
So
if you do find like a small, tiny piece of content that happened to work, like a one off tweet, a one off reel that took you 25 minutes to actually create, if you have content market fit with that idea, that's a signal. And when I say you have content market fit, I mean like a real signal. It's not like I got 5 likes, this is content market fit. I mean, the piece like took off. It started to open some opportunity, but it was a short piece of content. It was a long LinkedIn update, but it got hundreds of thousands of impressions. Okay, now you have content market fit and it was just a small piece. Something that you said in that asset resonated with people. So, time to double down on that story and own it and embrace it. A few years ago, we created a piece where we broke down, it was inspired by another asset where we talked about the unbundling of Excel and how Excel, when unbundled, provides a ton of SaaS opportunities. We wrote this piece. It started with just like a blog post. And then we were like, whoa, this took off. Tons of traction, got new clients, new leads on the back of it. Let's turn this into a Twitter thread. Let's turn this into a LinkedIn update. Let's turn this into a YouTube video. Let's turn this into an Instagram post. And we've done that over years, right? And because of that, we were also like, what if we created the same piece, but the unbundling of G Suite, the unbundling of Reddit, and we continue to replicate that idea because we had content market fit. Those are the types of signals that if you are tuned into your audience, you should be looking for so you can find new ways to say the same thing with the slight twist.
I love it. So that's a good takeaway too, right? To like post, go look at it, learn, and
Yeah.
then have a fluid content strategy as you move forward. That's awesome. Ross, this has been a ton of fun. For people who want to connect with you, what's the best place for them to find you online and learn
Yeah.
more?
Yeah, so definitely connect with me on all your favorite social media channels. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, etc. You can find me at Ross Simmonds or at the coolest cool on Twitter. Definitely connect and check out rosssimmons.com. That's where you can find all of the latest and greatest information around things that I'm writing, things that I'm doing. But of course, smash that subscribe button over on Create Like the Greats as well as on YouTube. Happy to connect. I know I gave you all a bunch of call to actions there. So the easiest one is to probably just find me on your favorite network. I'm there. let's connect. Jordan, I want to give you your kudos before we wrap this up and just say thanks for all that you've done for the marketing community. Thanks for bringing the value with this podcast. The industry needs more of this. So thank you for having me on as a guest. I love what you do and love what the team's been putting out there for content. So keep it up. And thank you for making the time.
Oh, thank you, man. And thanks again for coming on. For anybody who wants to connect with Ross, I will put links to his stuff in the show notes, and be on the lookout for his new book. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode. I'm your host, Jordan Shelton. Hit that like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff at the bottom of whatever app you are listening to this on. I'll catch you next time.